It is being bold, it is being brilliant, it's being non-apologetic about what we're doing.
You know, we had to leverage those abilities and just to come to the table and execute like never before.
Bring in capable people, coach them, make sure they're connected to the outcome, and let them run.
As a leader and with your team, have to have the will to win.
Connecting more with our humanity and, pausing for a moment to be the human beings that we are.
But with humility, you know that you can leverage that skill set that people have and let them be their best.
This will be a time of innovation.
Hi, and welcome to Courageous Leadership in Times of Global Crisis and Uncertainty, an HMG live virtual briefing covering what matters most to drive a winning agenda and make the future a better place. A warm welcome to today's host, Lead Principal and CEO of HMG Strategy, Hunter Muller.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2020 Denver CIO Executive Leadership Summit, Virtual Summit. I'm Hunter Muller. My team and I are delighted to be here with you today, and I think we have a world-class program for you today. Truly brilliant thought leadership as we all manage to lead courageously through this pandemic and this global crisis. A big thanks to our partners today, supporting partner Duo, as well as CyberArk. Thank you very much for your continued support and engagement. Please visit them on the HMG website or their websites directly, and the Colorado SIM chapter, great partners for a long time. We've been busy since the whole lockdown, shutdown, whatever you want to call it, digital summits, digital briefings, webinars with our various partner companies. Hopefully you've been dialing into the various conferences and summits and thought leadership, the whole theme around leading courageously, leading passionately, and leading authentically in these trying times. As we shift into the second half of our program in June, we'll be coming up with a whole new theme, and hopefully you stay dialed in. And as you can see, in through June and in all the way through to August, and finally in September, October, we'll be spinning up the hybrid event format where we'll actually be holding physical events and broadcasting out. Please stay dialed in and refer your peers and your friends to our summit model. So again, thank you for zooming in today, and let's get the program rolling. Welcome. First up is going to be Brandon Traffanstedt from CyberArk, Global Director of Solutions Engineering. Brandon, welcome to the program. Hey, by the way, Brandon is one of our top presenters here, folks. And if you haven't checked CyberArk out, it's a really, really interesting company. Brandon, tell us what's new since this whole work from home, work virtually. What's new at CyberArk, and what are you seeing across the globe?
So what we've seen is the acceleration of a couple of different principles. Users have been moving from on-prem into their homes and remote work for quite some time now. It's the recent events that have kicked that into high gear. So there are three areas that we've seen as it relates to powerful access, which is kind of CyberArk's bread and butter. And that is, how do we make sure that folks existing outside of our perimeter get secure access into said perimeter? How are we automating any operational tasks that used to be manual, take forever, and couldn't scale the way we're scaling now? But also, how do we secure and continue to attest to access into all these cloud processes that are fostering the remote access and the automation that we're seeing in the previous two?
So are you seeing a spike in breaches and attacks?
Attacks of opportunity is what we're seeing in particular. Nation states will continue to be nation states. Traditional threat actors will keep looking for holes in that ever dissolving perimeter. But these days, threat actors are taking advantage of uncertainty, but also of distractions. And also kind of some of the operational things we've been doing to make sure our end users are able to get their jobs done. For instance, you hire me to work on-prem, you likely have removed my local administrative access. But now that I'm at home and I need to install my printer and I have to do all this other work, the question becomes, do you give me that access temporarily? Do you give it to me permanently? Or do you remove it outright and risk causing me problems? So a lot of times we're seeing folks given way too much access, and threat actors take advantage of this, as well as the propensity to click on more emails as it relates to what's going on in the world these days to grab that foothold. So we see more of the foothold granting stuff, which then starts the lateral movement processes these days.
You know, Brandon, how do you at CyberArk help in this new distributed work architecture?
So one tenet hasn't changed. Attackers will always leverage privilege to attack, right? Breaches involve privileged access no matter how we look at it. So what we've seen being very helpful is, number one, look at this time as a way to reattest to how much privilege is available on the endpoint, the laptops that we're all using to Zoom in today. But also doing things like promoting network boundaries, promoting multi-factor, which our friends at Duo will likely tell you about left and right. These are things that now we have more time to review. We can also look at just how successful the programs have been. So long story short, reattest the existing security controls and look at where you can get the highest security value with the least amount of effort. And I feel like as a very visible millennial, you're probably all laughing at the millennial way of doing things, but these days we have opportunities for high value, low impact stuff, and we need it because there's a million other things going on in securing our organizations.
Hey, Brandon, a little bit about you professionally on a personal note in your career ascent, and you've risen to the point now where you're really an external facing spokesperson for CyberArk. Little thoughts about the culture, what's unique about CyberArk and your ascent.
Yeah. So at CyberArk, there are two things that got me excited in the very beginning when I was begging CyberArk to bring me on board. The first was the simple passion of the organization. It permeates all across the C-suite, as well as the product teams, as well as the field teams too, that many of your groups may talk to directly. It's we're not looking for customers. We tend to look at folks as partners in security. That passion extends to adoption. For me, that's key. Before I was at CyberArk, I was an application owner. I was one of your Unix admins who tends to be pretty averse to change. And I say Unix, which kind of tells you how long ago it was. But one of my things was if I didn't see operational benefit in what I was doing, I didn't really understand the security side of things. If I didn't see that adherence to the way I used to do things, I would fall on the floor, roll around, and tell you it was the worst thing ever. So the passion extends from security to allowing users to connect just as they always have, whether they're using a browser to connect to one of the big three cloud consoles, whether they're connecting to an AIX system like I used to do, or whether they're just doing RDP to Windows systems. If they can use their own stuff, well, now we've taken the operational pain out of security. So passion's key, number one, but also partnership. The fact that we work with a number of the big guys, including Duo from an integration standpoint, simply allows us to get those high security wins by having your vendors integrate so that you don't have to hound us together. So being able to take that off of your plates, again, very, very full plates these days, is another thing that I've seen consistently at the forefront of what CyberArk's doing.
Interesting. You must see all sorts of things with various clients across the globe. What are you seeing mostly now?
One of the biggest things we see these days is lack of visibility. It's always been a thing, right? In many cases, the technology teams, the security teams don't necessarily know what's going on operationally. It used to be things like Brandon would create his own personal admin accounts to go around any security controls we have. But these days, with the move to the cloud, what we're seeing is many teams that are responsible for compliance or governance or security don't necessarily work hand in hand with the team standing up our cloud infrastructure. So the preponderance of things called shadow admin roles or highly privileged roles that threat actors have used in a number of recent high-profile breaches, they don't look like admin roles, they don't quack like admin roles, but they can be used to elevate privilege. In many cases, this is news to a lot of our teams. So one of the things we've done recently is double down on the creation of free utilities that helps you figure out what's going on out there so you can start having the conversation about what to potentially do about it.
Excellent. And I noticed you have a recent acquisition. A little bit more on that?
That's right. So what is it? One Thursday ago, we announced the acquisition of a company called Idaptive. The key to this acquisition is the fact that the concept of privileged access is everywhere. Used to be that core on-prem stuff. Think big appliances chilling out inside of a server room. These days, your finance teams, your social media teams are accessing very privileged elements of our organizations. Access to a Twitter account, potentially. If you're in a relationship-driven business, if that access is compromised, you've now hurt the trust of your customer base. So that acquisition helps us extend this concept of privilege management to stuff that you wouldn't traditionally see as privileged. And again, that definition continues to broaden as more tools are adopted, more automation is being done, and as relationship-focused business has never been as big of a focus as it has been in recent months.
How can folks get started with you to just begin a dialogue? So on a kind of a light level, but an executive briefing, for example.
Yeah. So if you're already working with CyberArk, the concept of an executive briefing is a very popular one. It's something that your teams can set up. If you've not worked with CyberArk before, it's up to you. You could reach out to us, reach out to me personally. We can set something up for you, just a conversation. Or I mentioned those free utilities that help your teams generate that visibility. Those are available on our GitHub page. So a number of ways to get started. If you already have a relationship, hit us up. If you don't, depending on what level of conversation you'd like to have, if it's a chat, if it's a demo, just let us know. We're happy to help. And of course, use the free utilities out there. That's why we place them in there.
Excellent. And so that's out there in the marketplace for people to grab and try.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And then a publicly traded company, right? Been public for a while. Stock just keeps on chugging along and going up. That must make you happy.
Always happy to see CyberArk's work reflected in the market, for sure.
That's amazing, the growth that you all have achieved. So Brandon, thank you so very much for being on the program today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Hunter. Really appreciate it.
Great. Check out CyberArk, folks. Great security company. Really one of HMG's top picks. Next up is Molly Rozzi, CTO and Managing Director of Gagan and McDonald, leading our panel around reimagining business and the future of work. Molly, you're ideally suited for this panel session. Please join me as well as the panelists, please. Great to see everyone.
Hi, Hunter.
So much. Oh.
Hi, guys. You all look so great. You're great friends. I've known many of you for years, some decades. Thanks for making it to the program.
So happy to be here, Hunter. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. You want to set a little self-introduction, Molly, and set the context?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Molly Rozzi. I'm with Gagan McDonald, and as Hunter mentioned, our firm specializes in leadership development, culture change, employee engagement, and internal communications. So the situation the world is in right now is obviously really aligned with our passion of the human struggle of change. And I'm so excited to talk about reimagining business and the future of work. We've all been kind of studying this for some time, and then entered COVID-19, which has accelerated digital transformation, business transformation, and so many of these issues. And the panel that we have together today is really, you know, on the front line of leading so much of these efforts. So we have Brenda Horn, Global CIO with Arrow Electronics. We have Stephen, and Stephen, you'll have to help me with your last name. Katsirubas. That's not quite right. We'll have Stephen introduce himself better. Margot Sharapova and Michael Spandau from Fender. So a great group of people with very diverse backgrounds and also diverse industries. So we have people who are in business to business and business to consumer. So I thought we could start the conversation with how this pandemic has affected your business. Maybe Michael, you could kick us off on what you've seen at Fender, and then we can get some of the other group to weigh in.
First of all, thanks for inviting me to this panel here. And Hunter, good to see you, and good to be with everyone here. So I'm the CIO of Fender Musical Instruments, and we build beautiful guitars and amplifiers. It's about, how long is this now ago? It seems like 10 weeks ago, where we decided from one day to another to basically send all of our employees home, working in the offices, and have them work from home. So, but we were able to pull that off, and pretty much on a moment's notice, and we have been actually working very well as an organization. The biggest challenge for us was really primarily related to the factories and keeping them up and running, keeping, institution social distancing them. We run a one-shift operation. We had to basically run in 2 shifts. And so a lot of planning and went into, how to deploy something like this, which is, as you can imagine, pretty difficult on a shop floor where you can't really move machines and work cells around. But what I will say is we are working very well under these new circumstances. We have right now no plans to bring the employees back into the offices. And really our biggest concern, and we pretty much start every meeting with, is the health and safety of our people. And that's just topic number 1. And how do we ensure that, we as employers have everything in place we can do to keep our people, healthy and safe.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I read a Korn Ferry study that 50% of Chinese workers are experiencing some level of depression post-pandemic as they've returned to work. So really admire what you're doing to take care of your folks. Brenda, what are you seeing in how the pandemic has affected things at Arrow?
Well, thank you. Much like Michael, one of the major areas that we are struggling with is to keep our warehouses open. It's not too difficult to send home IT workers, salespeople, operational people, and we already had all of the electronics in place to be able to collaborate seamlessly from home, just because we are a worldwide organization and have to interact with teams across the world all the time. So that was not too difficult, but we had to come up with a way to be safe in the warehouses without having to shut them down. So we went to a split shift situation where we'd only have a portion of the warehouse workers in the warehouse at any given time. In the event that anyone did get sick, that it would only expose a fraction of the warehouse workers. So that's been one of the challenges. But I think the other part of the challenge that is a challenge like the warehouse situation, it's easy to apply a solution. But when you're challenged with more emotional and psychological type of things, sometimes maybe even irrational. So some of the workforce being fearful that if employees were working from home, were they really working? Were they being productive? Were they doing what they were supposed to do? And as somewhat, odd as it sounds to me, because especially being in the IT space, we're used to working Saturday mornings, Tuesday night at midnight, a system goes down, a data center goes down, you're working anytime, all the time, anywhere. I found it more difficult to explain to certain individuals how do we measure productivity amongst the various workforce to show that people were being extremely productive working from home. And in many cases, we were told more productive than when they were in the office. And that has been an overriding theme that we've seen for several weeks now and repeated over and over. So it's been a learning and challenging environment, but in some ways very insightful for all of us.
Thank you so much. Steve, I know you have quite a big manufacturing base as well with Hunter Douglas. How has some of this affected your business?
Take myself off mute. Good to see everyone. Hunter, good to see you. Brenda, good to see you. Molly, good to see you again. All our friends out there. Much similar to Brenda, we have about 25 odd different manufacturing and fabrication locations throughout North America that have been impacted, any given day, any given week, where they're shutting down, opening back up, shutting down again. you know, the local governments, you know, state governments, et cetera, having, you know, different says in the matter. You know, we've done different things to get them back open. At the same time, you know, our business, the Hunter Douglas branded business, which is the core of our business, is so highly dependent on people being in those homes. Our dealers basically, you know, coming in, measuring, installing, and selling, that, you know, our business has obviously taken a pretty big hit. Lucky for us, we, you know, our Levelor business, which is predominantly sold through Lowe's, and if you've been to a Lowe's or Home Depot, they're the only ones who are, you know, busy these days, it seems. So, and again, we've done things. I mean, we're not in it for the money or for the revenue per se, but we've pivoted to a lot of our locations to making PPE. So we're making masks, we're making gowns, we're 3D printing parts for ventilators and things of that nature. So we're keeping ourselves kind of busy and, you know, doing what we can, doing our part, and keeping our, you know, trying to keep our employees involved and engaged as well. So, you know, long story short is, you know, we've been at this, and I think Michael was saying, I mean, I don't even know, 8-10 weeks, I'm not even, maybe more, I'm not even really sure, right? But we've been at this for a while. Our productivity, what Brenda said, is, you know, I was talking to somebody, one of my reports this morning, about he feels maybe we should just stay this way for, you know, the longer term, and because people are being more productive, they're not getting interrupted. It's just, you know, sort of what's missing is, you know, the social aspect and sort of being, you know, confined to your home office and not being able to, you know, go out to dinner or whatever. So I think that's just sort of, you know, wearing on people. And you mentioned sort of depression, cabin fever, and people just going a little kind of stir crazy. I think that's having some impact. But, you know, I think there's, you know, a couple of things like silver linings around, you know, at least my perspective. You know, I'm home, I've done some stuff around the house, I've done some stuff to my Jeep, I've done, spending all kinds of quality time with my children. And so that's, you know, that's great. And I think, you know, I think we're starting to come out of it a little bit. I mean, things are opening up in certain locations. I know I'm based in Denver, obviously with everybody else here, that, you know, they're opening restaurants and slowly but surely in parks and different things. So, you know, I think we're kind of hopefully getting there, and things will start to get to a new normal at some point.
Thank you so much. So Margot, as I was looking at your business, you've got locations in the US and in Australia. So you have a unique perspective seeing this happen kind of on different ends of the earth, literally. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about your business and how you've been impacted?
Sure. So hi, I'm Margot Sharapova. Good to see everyone. I grew up in Denver, but I'm based in Salt Lake City. So Incitec Pivot Limited, we're about a $2 billion Australian headquartered company that manufactures and services explosives and fertilizers. So we mainly serve the mining and the agriculture industries. I'd have to really give credit to our CEO. She called pretty early, I want to say by the 10th of March, to start to consider bifurcation, as well as just as many office people working from home as possible. A little bit earlier than I think the leadership was ready, to be honest. But she has a background in safety. And because we're either trying to blow things up or stop them from blowing up, safety is a really big part of our culture. I think that there's a real question mark as the Southern Hemisphere is entering their fall. Will they have more cases? You know, overall, Australia's had very good testing results. Also, because Australia is very much, you know, dense populations in a few cities, a lot of people actually fly to work. They're called FIFO, fly in, fly out, and many of our personnel are fly in, fly out. And so a lot of our discussions, both here in the Americas and in Australia, is how do we use our existing safety culture to think about those critical safety controls around physical distancing, hygiene, you know, and the like. So we're cautiously optimistic, at least in the Southern Hemisphere, we'll have some part of our office space returning around, well, in the June, July timeframe. But, you know, for folks that you know, childcare might not be resolved, maybe there's someone in their home that's immunocompromised, or they're taking care of an elderly parent. I think that we're going to continue to have more flexible work arrangements than we've ever had in the past. To just give you an idea, so we sent home about 20% of our workforce, so about 1,000 people, who in the past, many of them had never dialed into WebEx before. We have finance managers, director level, who do not have a laptop. We're very face-to-face, relationship-based culture. And so I think it's been a real change, at least for the office-based personnel, to now primarily be working out of their homes.
So with all of that, that's a lot of just change of mindset and ways of working and even relationships, I would imagine. What are some of the things that you're doing to survive and even thrive in these new evolving conditions?
Well, that first week before we officially permanently sent people home, we had a test because we weren't sure if we had enough VPN connections. Sure. I don't know if many of you were like eyes on glass for a week to see when you peaked out. That combined with multi-factor authentication. So that from a survival perspective, it was all eyes on infrastructure, really getting people to either take their existing computers home, even desktops. We don't have inventory management. It was a trust thing. I think that we've been lucky, unlike Brenda, generally people have been trusting that folks are getting their job done. But I think a lot of folks were not very, senior leaders, many of my colleagues were not very enthusiastic historically about work from home. And they've actually admitted that, wow, you know, this whole experience has changed my mind, that I'm more open to having different types of work arrangements than I've had in the past. I think that like any good crisis, it can bring a team together or it can tear them apart, sort of what Snehal mentioned earlier. And I found that if anything, folks are more comfortable with being vulnerable as leaders or with their colleagues, which is, I think, intensified sort of the collaboration and the trust and the team building. So, you know, I was joking at the lead into this, you never waste a good crisis. Well, you know, you can come out of it stronger for sure if that trust is there and folks feel comfortable sharing maybe what's going on in their personal lives.
That's great. Steve, are there some other things you're doing around leadership that are different during this time?
I think it just, you know, it's things, you know, it's a sort of different environment we're working in and requires you to kind of be a different leader. I mean, you know, like Margaret said, you know, like different ways of working and letting people, you know, kind of have different work arrangements, and people got stuff they're dealing with, whether it be, you know, kids or family or, you know, other situations that might deal with, you know, kind of increases the emphasis on being flexible, and it really just, you know, focus on getting the work done as opposed to maybe when it gets done per se, you know, during a typical sort of maybe 8 to 5 day or what have you. So I think, you know, during these times, leadership, staying in touch with all your employees. I mean, just like anyone, we're doing, you know, everything's virtual, right? So we're doing Zooms, we're doing Google Meets, we're doing all hands with the entire IT department, let's say, to make sure that everybody's staying engaged. Virtual happy hours. It's getting, you know, that's getting, after like the 8th one, that you run out of things to talk about, but you got to get a little creative team building activities over Zoom and various different things. But, you know, giving people the sort of the flexibility and, you know, to get their job done when they sort of can, I think has been important. And then I think in the long term, also that, you know, what kind of arrangements will people need, you know, in a new normal if the schools aren't open or if, you know, things aren't back to normal. I mean, we're not, you know, I think we've proven out pretty well about how sort of adaptable and flexible, at least, you know, the IT group, and we're in the manufacturing and fabrication business. Obviously, we're not doing that, you know, remote, but, you know, we don't need to be there in those facilities per se, you know, full time or whatever. And we can kind of stay where we are and probably be, you know, again, just as equally productive. But, you know, in terms of leadership, I think it's really, you know, it's sort of challenged IT, you know, how to whip out those contingency plans and those incident response plans about how we're going to deal with things, and kind of illustrate a little bit about, you know, in certain cases, how unprepared you are for some of these things. I mean, at the end of the day, we couldn't get any more laptops, right? We're repurposing, you know, dusting things off the shelf and handing those out. At the end of the day, we're saying, okay, take your desktop home. You know, you go into some of these offices, it's like, you know, desk chairs are gone, printers are gone. Anything that wasn't nailed down is now gone. And, but hey, at the end of the day, people need to do their job. So we said, all right, let's make sure we have the right safeguards and controls in place, but do what you need to do. And, we'll sort it all out. We'll sort it all out later. But it's definitely changed people's thinking about virtual working and, that type of thing. And I think, for the long term and for the permanent, because we were pretty old and stodgy a little bit and, not so open and receptive to those ideas. And now it makes sense. And I think that, from a real estate perspective, that'll have a pretty big impact on us as well. I guess we don't really need all this space. And I guess we don't need a new building now, do we? I guess we can move half these people home, or, maybe it's coming in the office 1 or 2 days a week or something to that effect. So I think the ramifications are going to be pretty long and get us thinking a little more innovatively than maybe we have in the past. So IT is well positioned, to help lead the charge on some of those things. We've been leaned on quite a bit. So, which is, again, some of the great things that are going on. It's a testament to our capabilities and our abilities to kind of, thrive in terms of crisis or times of crisis.
Sure. Michael and Brenda, do either of you have something to add on just your leadership style and how that has or hasn't lined up with other leaders in your organization?
And maybe just one additional comment in terms of communications. All the panelists have emphasized the point of excellent communications. I couldn't agree more with that. But I think the other thing that's important is everyone is reading the news and how severely the economy is impacted. So I think we did a very good job in being very transparent about the impact to our business. And we were very transparent in terms of cost saving measurements that we had to put in place. So, I always had daily meetings with my leadership team, and not just talking about IT, but just overall business. And I think the more transparent you can be, the better, because especially people are sitting at home, they're reading the news, they're seeing how other businesses are impacted and probably are wondering what the impact's going to be on them and, their own business. So that is, I really think you really cannot over communicate when it comes to the well-being of the business and what needs to put in place when the business is being impacted by the pandemic.
Yeah, we've been really busy at Gagan McDonald putting tools in place for people to communicate with employees in ways they never had before. So many people who aren't connected to the network or don't have a physical device, as Steve was mentioning. So some of these new employee communications apps or more sophisticated intranets. Are there certain tools, either for internal communications or for other purposes, that you're putting in place now that you didn't have before?
Well, no, not really. We had Zoom, we had Slack, we had, we didn't implement any new systems, so to speak. We're looking at other systems outside of communications that, for instance, we're looking at reservation systems, hoteling systems, because we believe that's something that we do need to put in place and offer up when we want employees to come back to the office, although we're having a big discussion about, when to do that. So that's the reservation is, hoteling is a big topic. The other thing that is a challenge for us, and I have to assume it's probably for most companies, is are their forecasting and demand planning systems. Mm-hmm. None of these systems basically have the pandemic formula in there. And, we basically had to override our entire demand planning systems because, the forecasting systems, you can't go back in history and pick up those trends. So I'm waiting for the company to basically provide the forecasting solution that helps with, that has the I guess the pandemic impact and as part of it. So, you know, we can better plan a demand going forward. So that's quite a challenge for us, because that's again, all that the planners are basically just hard coding and taking guesses how this is going to continue to unfold.
And so many people are talking about supply chain and the understanding of your supply chain in a whole new way. Is that part, when you talk about demand planning and forecasting, is that part of that model?
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. So you know, we basically try to figure out what our holiday business is going to be, you know, 6 months from now, 7 months from now. And, you know, we had that all mapped out. We knew what it was 2 months ago or 3 months ago, but that has completely changed. So, and the problem is we can't really rely on any historic models or any other model to figure it out. It's really just our gut instinct on what it's going to be.
Thank you. So Brenda, that has to be a challenge for you as well, given the different business units at Arrow, the global piece, and huge supply chain questions there. Would you have anything to add?
Well, the supply chain challenge is very real, especially in terms of the components business, where we rely on a lot of components coming out of China and Asia. And so it has been a struggle, and it's been a struggle in both directions, trying to understand and predict areas that are slowing down tremendously because of the pandemic, but then there's areas that have accelerated tremendously. So we do cover a large, broad spectrum of types of equipment, including healthcare equipment and certainly a lot of IT equipment, that sort of thing. So what we've been struggling with mostly is making sure that we can continue to get from our suppliers the components and the elements we need to be able to provide to our resellers. And it's getting better and it's getting easier, but it's still certainly something we're struggling with, and there's not really any magic wand you can wave to try and get over it. You just adjust every day. Every day you look at, you know, your demand and your inventory, and every day you try and adjust. And like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So we're getting better at it, and that's somewhat exciting from the perspective to know that we can adjust and be very agile in our response to a very drastic change in our business.
And then I'm sure you had all kinds of beautiful plans crafted in February that now have shifted. Are there other areas that you're needing to accelerate your investment and maybe put other things on hold?
Yes, we've gone through our entire portfolio of projects that were either underway or slated to get started sometime soon, and essentially reprioritized, shuffled the deck entirely. So any of our areas around cloud and IT distribution, all of the projects that support that area have just gotten accelerated and moved forward. Things that are less, I would say more systemic or back office efficiency gains that we need to do, and they're good things to do, those have been pushed aside temporarily while we take advantage of, not just take advantage of, but actually respond to help in supplying people with laptops or supplying medical equipment, or making sure cloud resources are available for companies or groups like this to be able to sustain their environments in a more virtual way.
Hey, Molly, can I jump in real quick?
Of course.
Great job, by the way. Great panel session. Thank you guys for being here. Kind of like a closing question that Molly, you can facilitate. I always go back, best time ever to be a technology leader. All these lessons learned going through, this is hopefully the first and last global pandemic crisis we've gone through. Lessons learned and the innovation that you were able to drive, given the past. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. Margot?
Sure. I think we really focused on our core services. So we stopped all programs that weren't about just running our business. I think that we're a big enough company to have big company problems, but we're not big enough to solve them at scale. So prioritization in a normal environment is really important and hard to do. There's nothing like a pandemic to really sharpen that. As far as what priorities are you calling, making sure everyone's on the same page back from a communication perspective. A lot of what we've been trying to do is focus on using the assets we have, because we weren't using them terribly well. But one area we have been exploring, and I'm hopeful, this change in mindsets of being able to do more remote work, more digitized work, because we used to just throw people at problems, is how do we look at, for example, some of the wearables and remote technologies, because it's very expensive now when we're having to charter flights to some of our remote operations. Why does someone in HR need to be on that flight, right? Why does an expert need to travel? Can we leverage some of these newer technologies to do remote expertise? So I think that's the area I see the most opportunity. Plus, just this focus, it just really reminds people how important infrastructure connectivity is, and that's something that was significantly underinvested in, and people are now appreciating. People actually, they always like the individuals in IT, but they never like the department. They actually like the department right now because it's so essential to them just being able to do what they do. So those would be some of the areas for us.
We're about at the end of time. Molly, great job. Margaret, great. Brenda, great to see you. Thank you very much. Stephen, always good to see you, my friend. And Michael, great to see you. I got to follow up with you. My son wants a guitar.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Stay healthy, stay well.
The rest of the program. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Molly.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. I'd like to welcome the industry search executives to the program. Welcome Renee Arrington, Mark Polansky, and Tony Leng. Great to see you all today. Tony, you there?
Trying to be here.
Okay.
Yes. We just got to get the camera going.
Okay.
There we go. There I am. How are you today, Hunter?
Awesome. Great. Following a really stellar panel of global CIOs working through really serious issues, right? In this unbelievable, unparalleled time in our professional life, right? Tony?
It's amazing. There's three big things going on. There's a huge, tech transformation, corporate strategy, and kind of, business model transformation, and then a people transformation. Why? Because COVID-19 has just sped everything up. We all knew where we were going. Everyone had a sense of this is happening, but instead of it happening over the next 2 to 5 years, it's happened in the next two to 3 months, and it's all IT stuff. So what a great time.
So there are three things. 1, 2, 3.
Yes. Well, there are three big buckets of stuff that you have to focus on. The technology, the business strategy, and the business model, which is very much underpinned by technology. And if you're a tech guy, you should be at the table giving input on that. And then there's the people side of things. And you've heard a lot of great stuff from these executives around leadership. And that's a big leadership issue. They've been looking after their people. They've been making tough decisions. They've been doing tough things, but there's always another side to that. And we'll unpack that, hopefully, a little more as we move through today.
Well, let's punch down on it right now. There's this other aspect of the human, the really being a real person, a complete person with your team as you lead authentically. Yes. Talk a little bit more about that, Tony.
Well, let me give you an analogy. Imagine that a human being is like a flame, like a fire. We need to be resilient enough such that if a big gust of wind comes, we're not blown out, but not so resilient that when there's a storm raging, we're unaffected. We need to be what I call adaptively resilient. So we move, we flex, we grow, we develop. That requires two things. Yes, we have to do some tough things and make tough decisions, but we also need to be what I call strategically patient, and we need to be vulnerable. We need to actually, it's okay to say, I don't know what's going on. Who's been in a pandemic? You can't know everything. Cry for help. Empower your team members. Become open and humble. And as I mentioned, kind of, you know, open and vulnerable during a time where people expect strength. But being open and vulnerable, to me, reveals a tremendous inner strength that you can show as a leader. And I think people need to tap into that. It's what I'm calling adaptive resilience.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. We'll be back
Sure.
to you in a minute.
Yep.
Renee, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the program. It's always good to see you.
Always great to be here, Hunter. Thank you. And hello, Mark. Hello, Tony.
A little bit about Pearson Partners and your role there and what you're seeing.
Sure. So we're a retained executive search firm. We're part of a larger global network called IIC Partners. I'm honored to be president and COO of Pearson Partners, along with my business partner and colleague, Keith Pearson. We run a great team and a great firm. We've really been fortunate, Hunter, through this pandemic in that many of our clients are in essential industries, right? So work has been continuing for us. We've launched new assignments. We've completed existing assignments. So from that perspective, it's been very much business as usual, except that we're all, you know, far flung and working remotely. Although we're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and things are starting, as I heard someone say about Denver earlier, things are starting to open up here again in Dallas-Fort Worth.
Thank God. Great to see you. Always. Hey,
Yeah.
Mark, welcome to the program. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Hunter, and hey, Renee and Tony.
Hey, Mark.
So, Mark, put this in a context of crises, 10, 20, 30 years. What happens in a big crisis? What kind of innovation happens? What kind of great things? What's the silver lining happens here?
So the silver lining is that, as we spoke before, lots of things get accelerated, especially good things that are transformational, are cost saving, are market attacking, that sort of thing. And this is my 5th recession. I can tell you that coming out of each recession, there was technological transformation. So in '87, we came out looking for more visibility into the business and operations, and that was the birth of the big ERP kick. The 01-02 recession around the dot-com space was the relaunching of WW2 and the real push to online and mobility and connectivity. Then 08-09, the great recession in the financial space especially gave rise to all of the wonderful things we're doing now, like AI and ML and analytics and a large use of data, and what we would all call perhaps a WW3. We all get our opportunity to be creative and innovative coming out of a crunch. The other thing, of course, now, which was already started, was the move towards collaborative tools and interactivity. Nothing new about Zoom, just the fact that they've gone 30-fold on their daily usage. If I could take another minute, Hunter, I'd like to comment on the market, because I think there's some people out there that are watching Renee, Tony, and me that would like to know what the heck's going on. Straight up, our business over the last quarter has been negatively impacted anywhere between 25 and 50%, depending on the vertical. The majority of that, we feel, has been temporary, has been postponement. If you only have one CIO or one CTO or, God forbid, one CISO, you can't put that off very long. Although you don't have the bandwidth perhaps to process a search, you've got to get back to it. So we think that this is more or less temporary. But I'll tell you, more than being a technology executive, as you like to say, Hunter, today is the best day to be a job hunter, because the companies that are hiring now are the strong companies, the companies that are growing, and in industries that are growing. So with a 25 to 50% reduction in demand, let's find out what the supply looks like. Nikki, would you put our poll up on the screen? And we're going to ask everybody who's watching to compare with your perspective on career plans pre-pandemic. Are you now more likely to change roles now than before? Somewhat more likely, about the same, or somewhat less likely to change than before the pandemic? So please vote. And Nikki, when you think you've got a good cross-section, show us the results. Love this feature on Zoom, guys.
Excellent, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Tony, back to you. What are the trends that you're seeing out there in the Valley?
Well, Mark is absolutely right. Overall, business is down for a period of time. Why? Because companies are consolidating cash, they're being conservative, they're dealing with immediate issues. But, you know, you are either a hero or a villain, you know, during this last period of time. You were a hero if you adapted quickly, if you were driving the organization forward, if you put secure stuff. You know, we listened to Snehal, Michael, Stephen, Margot, Brenda, all kind of talking about what they did. They're all clearly heroes. But there were some villains out there caught with their pants around their legs. Those folks will be on their way out at some future time. And I think that in the next few months, there's going to be a massive uptick of businesses either doing stuff that was delayed or expanding, growing, grabbing the top talent, because suddenly it's about, have you got the right people to execute this compressed strategy? Do you have the leaders? Do you have the technical knowledge and skill? So everyone's going to be grabbing that talent. And frankly, in the next 3 to 6 months, this is going to be a wonderful time to have been someone who stood up and was counted during COVID-19.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tony. You know, Renee, following along that lines, I've heard that things have happened in 1, 2, 3 weeks, 1 month that would have taken 3 to 5 years. What are you hearing from your clients in that same regard?
No, 100%, Hunter. I absolutely agree with that. I've seen many of our clients that had technology plans in place that maybe it was 24 months, 36 months. And as many of our speakers have said today, they had to mobilize immediately and put those things in action within a matter of days or weeks, even depending on the company. That's been a huge shift, but it proves the adage, it's always great to have a plan and then have the talent, as Tony said. And I agree with what he said about clients will be looking for folks that have risen to the top during this crisis. And you can do that by delivering effectively on the plans that you have in place.
It's, you know, unprecedented demands regarding leadership, unprecedented demands on the team. I think Jerry Martin Flickinger said it from Starbucks. You know, this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. Timing and pace matter, right, Renee?
Absolutely. It is completely a marathon. It's very much like the process of joining a corporate board. If you're a CIO or any business leader, it's definitely a marathon. It's day by day, it's moment by moment. It's ensuring that you're leading in a way that is genuine, suiting of your style and fitting in with the culture of your current organization. And if you do those things, it is very much like training for a marathon. Every day you do your daily regimen and daily exercise. Same thing with your work. You have to deliver on the plans before you, ensure that your teams have the right leadership and vision to do the same, and you'll get there.
Excellent. Thanks, Renee. Hey, Mark, you talk a lot about the disruptive leader.
I will talk a moment about the self-disruptive leader. The idea of disrupting companies, disrupting industries. I sat and had lunch with a good friend of mine, Francisco de Souza, who used to run Cognizant. He talks about disrupting countries. So if we can disrupt companies, industries, and countries, let's start with ourselves. So our theory around disruption starts with oneself. And disruption is the old thinking out of the box, thinking courageously, and doing things you haven't done before, and doing them in ways you haven't done before. And by definition, that is self-disruption. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that, you know, and there's a really interesting, piece to that. I think to be a self-disruptive leader, you actually need to be open and you need to be humble, because you need to be listening to voices. You can't be the person who's, and Snehal said it, you can't be that dictator at the top saying, I've got this is what we're doing. In times like this where there's no predefined way of accomplishing, you have to be open, you have to empower people, and that is often self-disruptive to leaders. You need to be that vulnerable, you need to move quickly but also have strategic patience. What is that? And in our business it's about planting seeds, watering seeds, but you can't force somebody to do a search. You need to wait for it to kind of be the right moment to do that. So it's the same thing in our business, and it's being inclusive, being aware of your impact, listening, being open and humble. And those are my 2 cents. Renee, over to you.
There you go, Tony. I'll pick that up and run with it. I agree. And as you guys have heard me say many times, having confidence without hubris is one of the leadership qualities I look for when I'm looking for senior leaders of any kind for my clients. But particularly in a moment like this, when you have to be a human being, you have to be more sympathetic and empathetic than ever, because people are working from home and you may have disruptions. And so you have to be more understanding of the dog in the background or the front doorbell ringing or a child interrupting a conversation, things that we as search professionals may not have brooked in our candidates before this time. Now we have to be much more human, and not just us as search professionals, but any kind of leader has to be more genuine and understanding of the unique circumstances that we're all in the middle of right now.
Well said, Renee. Hey, I'm going to go back to the point I almost made before. We talked about demand and what's happening now in our market and how we are very, very confident, very optimistic about it coming back. And we started taking a poll of the supply side.
There it is.
50% about the same, 19% somewhat more likely, 23% more likely. So we've got better than 80 to 90% or more that are still open at least as much pre-COVID to change. So quickly, what my colleagues and I want you to know is now, while we have a little bit of a break, while you're home and you have some extra time, check your resume. If it needs help, get it. Check your online digital resume. Again, if you need help, get it. Make sure you Google yourself down to at least the second page and make sure nobody has it in for you. And then start networking, start talking, not actively, just, hey, if you hear something, let me know. And practice digital presence. Practice being on a call like this. Showing empathy is the #1 emotion everybody talks about during this time. And most of all, be patient, because time is on your side. It's going to get better, not worse.
And Mark, let me add to that. Those are brilliant points. Let me add, don't drift away. It's so easy to be kind of in your house and become disconnected. And thank you, Hunter, for these. It's amazing, and well done to the people who are on this call today. Just don't drift away. Stay connected. I think all of us have spoken about the network and how important that is. So don't drift away. Stay connected at all times.
Brilliant points, Mark, Tony, Renee. Thank you so very much. I think we're at the end of our time right now. We're going to segue over to the cyber security in a crisis panel session. Thanks, folks.
Always a pleasure.
Take care. Bye.
Good to see you all. And welcome, Michael, Jeff, Wendy, and Richard.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for making it, Richard. Hey, Wendy, you're with Duo Security, one of our partners here today. You're head of the Advisory CISOs practice. Do you want to kind of kick it off and set the context of what we're talking about here today?
The situation we find ourselves in is something that we didn't plan for. And as lots of people have been talking about today, there are a lot of things that we're doing now that we thought we couldn't do, that we were really nervous about. And part of that is distributing the workforce and allowing flexibility and remote connectivity, and saying to the people that work for us, the most powerful thing you can say is, I trust you. And this trust is playing out on the cybersecurity side. Now, there's there's a big thing these days about something called zero trust, which I don't really like that term. I think it is about learning how to get more powerful controls in place so that you can trust the workforce and you can trust the infrastructure that you have. So I think this is what we're focusing on these days.
A little bit more about Duo.
Well, Duo is making this trust possible. We started out with multi-factor authentication, but we have broadened beyond that to let you do things like check the security state of the devices that your people are using, even if you don't manage them. And being able to take a step back and say, look, you can use what you want at home, but if you want to access company resources, you need to meet this security standard. And it's up to you to figure out how you want to meet it, to update your devices accordingly and so on, and then you can access what you need to. So making that trust possible is what we do.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hey, Michael, want to join the program and give us a little context of San Rafael Hospital and your role?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you guys very much for having me here. I'm really humbled and honored to be here. So my name is Michael Archuleta. I'm the Chief Information Officer here for Mount San Rafael Hospital. We are a hospital here in Southern Colorado, and we're part of BridgeCare. So BridgeCare basically consists of 5 facilities. That's 4 25-bed critical access hospitals and 1 325-bed level 2 trauma center. So again, we are definitely in the mix of things, and I really think the acceleration of digital transformation is truly here. And once we get into a little bit more of this topic, really love to speak in regards to that on how IT has been a critical point to the overall success of COVID-19.
Great, thanks, Michael. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the program. Glad you can make it.
Thanks, Hunter. Glad to be here.
A little context around Honeywell Quantum Solutions.
Absolutely. And one thing I did want to say too is I certainly have not run into this before, and I don't think many of us have either. We're used to localized or regionalized issues, whether it's a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, a terrorist attack. Never, at least I shouldn't say never. However, this is one of the first times that the playing field has been leveled across the board, across the globe. It doesn't matter if you're a vendor, if you're industry, if you're government, everyone is impacted. And that's why I believe these events are so important to us, and truly grateful to be on the panel with such great leaders. So really happy to be here. So Honeywell Quantum Solutions. So we're doing some very unique things. We're part of Honeywell International. We are building the world's most powerful quantum computer. So 2 days before the global pandemic hit, at least for us when we started to work from home, we made the major announcement that said in June of this year, we were going to release said world's most powerful quantum computer. And as you can imagine, the impact that might have on an organization trying to deliver something like that requires a lot of hands-on in labs, working on our infrastructure. We were certainly impacted by this. Thankfully, I work with amazing scientists and engineers, and we are maintaining our track, and we still plan to release our quantum computer next month.
That's amazing. How long has that been in flight, that project?
So we've been working on it in earnest, I'd say, for the past 3 years. I've been in this role for the last 2. I'm very lucky that I run a cross-functional team where we are responsible for IT, cybersecurity, and physical security. But we've been slowly collecting the top physicists in the United States and harboring them here in the greater Denver area and seeing what we can do to make a trapped ion computer work for the world.
Very, very cool. Love it. More in a minute. Hey, Richard, why don't you join the program? We'd love to hear more about Celera and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so we are a seed-funded biomedical security startup. We're based out of Manhattan, New York, although I live and work from home in Boulder, Colorado here. So not an awful lot of change for me, although I don't get to go to the office quite so frequently as I once did. Yeah, I've heard a lot of the other speakers today talking about how COVID has impacted businesses and impacted their businesses in particular. And we've all read about a lot of people being laid off, but I have to say that we're going gangbusters right now, that COVID has really kind of helped a lot of our customers focus on cybersecurity, particularly since a lot of the nefarious players out there have tended to target us while we're in a mode of crisis in our companies. And I think that's drawn the attention of all of us to really to reevaluate the types of security controls we have in place and to keep things shored up.
Interesting. What are the challenges that you're coming up against?
Well, I think, you know, obviously the biggest crisis, and I tend to focus on the healthcare industry, and as Mike will attest, we work quite closely together here. Healthcare is being targeted quite offensively, actually, given the fact that, you know, our brave doctors and nurses are trying to keep us all alive through this pandemic right now. And that, you know, a lot of hospitals have been hit with ransomware and other types of extortion while people are distracted. A lot of smaller hospitals are suffering a bit of a financial crisis right now because they haven't made the transition to away from payment by results. So their cash flow is determined by the number of visits that they make, the number of operations they perform, and of course, all of that has been put on hold right now. So they're in particular crisis.
Interesting. Great. Thank you. Wendy, back to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. When you think of, you know, your Duo and what's unique about Duo, by the way, I'm a happy client. I enjoy it.
Great.
Yeah, about 6 months ago, I had an incident and I decided to use Duo, and it's been pretty seamless. What's the unique problem that you folks are solving?
Well, we like to say that our mission is to support your mission. So, you know, we try to make things as easy as possible, and then we try to get out of the way. So in the last few months, you know, with the pandemic and everything, we are seeing huge amounts of organizations starting multi-factor authentication for the first time. We were getting as many as 3,300 new signups a week. And that's, you know, besides the organizations that already had it, but not for everybody. And now they're expanding to make multi-factor authentication available to all of their employees. So we do that, but as I mentioned before, what we also do is give you more visibility. Like Brandon was talking about at the very beginning of this event, how to see what your people are actually using, not what you assign to them, but what they picked up at home and are using to access your resources, and giving you a way to help secure those, even if you can't manage them. So it's a more collaborative model for security.
Got it. Great. Thank you. Hey, Michael, why don't you come back to the program there? Question for you. How are you dealing with such a massive pressure and demands in your system right now?
You know, so like I stated, truly the acceleration of digital transformation is here. You know, this crisis, in my opinion, this crisis has fully displayed the value of IT and digital transformation as a whole. And we all heard the saying, get your house in order. A lot of these organizations basically not getting their home in order at times becomes a major panic. So even in the healthcare industry, we're starting to see, well, what do we do now? We're sending people home. Are we doing it in a secure way? Are we utilizing two-factor authentication? How are we basically validating ID verification of any type of telehealth visits that we do? Are we spinning up the very first telehealth visit? Are we utilizing virtual desktop infrastructure? So there's a lot of questions in regards to it. And that's why I say, ladies and gentlemen, is that it is so critical to continue to basically keep IT as a center point and the core strategic point of operational success. Because like I say, hospitals and clinics are digital companies that happen to deliver healthcare services. We're living in the digital age of healthcare. We have to act like a digital company, you know, and we see our other partners in our other industries out there, the banking industry, the natural gas industry, these industries 2 years advance when it comes to technology initiatives. But on the healthcare standpoint, we're dealing with patients' lives. That becomes a major, major problem, ladies and gentlemen. We should be leading the way when it comes to technology innovation. We should basically be moving forward together we need to have those transformational CIOs in place that are really leading the overall pack. I always like saying that from crawling to walking upright to carrying the organization, how the overall CIO has evolved from an actual tech manager to an actual driver role in the organization. And again, we've heard several discussions in regards to the transformation of the CIO. And we're going to continue to see either if you're a villain or if you're an actual superhero moving forward. And that's really going to be a critical point to the overall success of what you are doing and what you're delivering to your overall organization.
You know, one last question, kind of closing comment, Michael. What are the unique approaches you're doing or using during this unique time with COVID-19?
Yeah, so absolutely. So we're starting to see a massive increase of telecommunicating applications. So telehealth has been a big initiative for us. We have successfully sent our employees home. So we are utilizing a lot of virtualization efforts, virtual desktop infrastructure. We've also incorporated a lot on a cybersecurity standpoint for two-factor authentication, for ID verification, to make sure that the individual that you're speaking to on the other end is the actual person that you're speaking to moving forward. We've also incorporated a lot of initiatives when it comes to the Internet of Things, validating where is our current ventilators, where are our medical devices in place, and then also coming out to the statement that security isn't just about data. It's basically a matter of life and death. And you figure when we look at medical devices and when we look at security as a whole, that becomes a major problem because medical devices, again, you know, these are specific items that are being implanted in us, being placed inside of us. Look at the pacemaker software alone. There was 6,000 security flaws associated with that. 6,000 on this issue itself. So again, cybersecurity is a matter of life and death. And it has been a top priority in this organization that we basically make security a top initiative moving forward, because that is an important factor, especially during COVID-19. And I like the statement that stated attacks of opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. These hackers are attacking because of this opportunity. We need to be at our A game. And we're continuing, unfortunately, to see some massive ransomware attacks because organizational houses haven't been in order and haven't put cybersecurity as an actual top initiative. But that's not happening on my watch.
Thanks, Michael. Great stuff. Stay with us. Hey, Jeff, why don't you come on back? When you think of the kind of security layers and projects and initiatives that you're focused on, Jeff, in these unique times, what's working for you and what do you focus on most?
Well, if you subscribe to the old theory that it's better to be good, lucky than good, I'd say we fell into that category a little bit. And one of our predominant ways that we have protected our trade secrets and our intellectual property for quantum computing was going the traditional route of having an air-gapped segmented networking environment, which is great when all of your workers are on site. When they're all sitting at home now, that makes that physical connection that much more difficult. Leading up to the end of 2019, we had made some pretty substantial investments in some remote access capabilities, but not just the access control from a granular level, but also the ability to monitor those connections. And I know that somebody had mentioned this before, visibility is absolutely key, not just from an IT performance perspective, but clearly from a cybersecurity perspective. Being able to see what's happening in the network environment so that, and I know somebody said this, right? We have to trust our end users. And so, but we still have to trust but verify from a security perspective. So what I like to be able to do is at least have the ability to see what's happening and the ability to forensically go back in and look in case there is an alert of some sort that we can go see what happened during that time. So not just a data loss prevention perspective, but things that we're doing to actively monitor those lines coming in from a remote access connection into what used to be a very physically air-gapped environment that you had to be on site for. That has really been a significant challenge for us. And I think one of the key words that's been stated throughout today has been acceleration. And so having that in place has really allowed us to accelerate, get our scientists and engineers working remotely in a very secure way. And so that our team, from a cybersecurity perspective, can monitor for any type of anomalies in that environment, whether it's an individual doing something unintentionally, or if it's more nefarious activity coming in from the outside. So again, we were very lucky. We planned to be good, but we had to be lucky very fast. So very fortunate from that perspective.
Excellent. Great. Thanks for your time and your input. Hey, Richard, welcome back to the program one more time. When you think about kind of the lessons learned looking back, what did you learn most during this whole process?
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned, through the current crisis. One is that, crisis is an opportunity, right? If we look at, the Chinese word for crisis, it's wei ji, if I pronounce that correctly, which means, crisis plus opportunity, right? Or danger plus opportunity. And I think those of us that have been forced in many ways by the adaptation of our business environment to send our employees home, to embark upon very rapid digitalization and adoption of technologies and services, particularly in the healthcare space, as Mike talked about with telehealth, which has absolutely exploded since February this year, as patients tried to stay as far away from the doctor's office and the hospital as possible. I think these are great opportunities for us to improve the efficiency of the services that we offer. But there's a caveat to that. We need to go back and we need to reassess the security controls that we have in place, right? So do we have adequate multi-factor authentication? Do we have a sufficiently robust VDI infrastructure to support our users working from home? Or alternatively, do we trust them enough to use their own BYOD devices? Simply because, as one of the other speakers mentioned, there's not enough laptops, right? You can't get a laptop for love or money right now. So, there's a lot of things that we need to go back and revisit. Jeff talked about micro-segmentation, right? Which is going to be critical for the containment of infestations on our network and perpetrators gaining access to our network. So we need better visibility. We need a better understanding of risks across our applications, our data, and our user base. And I think that the COVID pandemic, as horrible as it is, has really given us an opportunity to go back and reevaluate the architectures that we use to provide services to our users, whether that's a legacy client server on-site, on-prem type of service, or whether it's using an increased level of cloud-based services. Do we have sufficient capabilities on our VPN infrastructure to support indefinitely the number of users that we have? What risks are we uncovering by enabling split tunneling, for example, which was verboten before the crisis, but is now widely used in order to channel traffic, directly to the internet rather than push everything back to corporate HQ? These are a lot of questions that I think that we need to revisit over the coming months. And I think all of us on this panel are going to be extremely busy, either working through some of those issues in our own companies or advising our customers and clients.
Perfect. Well said, Richard. I want to thank you, Richard. I want to thank Wendy, Jeff, and Michael, the other panelists. Perhaps the other panelists could join us in a final kind of a goodbye. A big thanks to Duo Security and CyberArk. The summit was powered by Duo and CyberArk, great partners. Check them out. And the Denver Sim chapter. We look forward to being with you in person in the September timeframe for our in-person summit with you all. Thanks so much and have a great day. Appreciate your engagement.